So as you've probably already heard by now, there have been leaks surfacing online about how we might be getting a Red Dead Redemption remaster, or, according to some newer leaks, a full-on remake. Now, according to these leaks, we may be getting it as soon as August. Now again, whether or not this is a remake or just a remaster is yet to be seen, or if it is even coming at all, but regardless of that fact, this is something that I've been thinking about for a very long time and have been wanting to talk about for a very long time. And along with that, I've also been thinking about some other remakes that I would love to see. But since we're already talking about Red Dead Redemption, let's first talk about why I think that one is justified, and it's actually the one that I am most excited for on this entire list. So let's get to it. So as you already know, that Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel to Red Dead Redemption 1. And if you want to go back and re-experience these games, the better way would be to play 1 and then 2. But again, because it's a prequel, sometimes it would be really cool to just play them in chronological order in a sort of nice, seamless fashion. And with 2018's version of the world to then 2010's version of the world, I feel like is a little bit jarring, at least personally to me. So being able to see a full-on remake of the first game in the same engine with similar graphics and whatnot, and of course I think it would probably be even a little bit better at least, but at least it makes a little bit more sense because at least this one is set afterwards, and so the transition makes even more so sense. But I was also thinking about this because, with The Last of Us, which is a sort of hotly debated remake, I know, we recently had a remake last year for the first game, even though that only came out like 9 years prior. But essentially, it was not only for introducing new fans into the series, a lot of which came directly after watching the HBO show. It's also a way to bridge that gap between 1 and 2 and like the seamless transition over them. Yeah, I know Part 2 doesn't really have all the features that Part 1 has, like in terms of haptics and whatnot, but I do imagine that Naughty Dog would be working on a PS5 version of the game at some point in the future, so yeah. Now before, when I thought about them making a Red Dead remake, as much as I wanted it, I kind of thought it wouldn't really be much of a possibility, at least not anytime soon, considering that they're working on GTA 6, which is still a few years away at least. And if you know anything about Rockstar, they work on one game for a good number of years until they are ready, which is what makes a lot of people adore them, because they, really spend their time with it. Now, on the other hand, it's not like it's a complete impossibility that they could have another team working on this, like they just handed it over, and maybe it is actually a remaster after all. But a remake is a little bit more on the harder to believe side of things, especially it coming next month. I don't really see it happening, but you know what? I would love to be proven wrong, so we'll see. And if that is the case, then hopefully I'll have a review out in September. But oh boy, too many games. Too many games. Now, moving on to some other remakes I would love to see. Firstly, in the Resident Evil franchise. We have Resident Evil 1 and Code Veronica. Both are games that a lot of people want to see be remade. Yes, I know. The first game has been remade already, but that was 20 years ago. And a lot of people want to see the first game remade in the newer RE engine. And the case for remaking the first game, and I guess even Code Veronica, which doesn't have a remake, is not just that people want to see it all pretty and dolled up in the new RE engine, but also there are a ton of new fans to this franchise, and while they could go back to that, I think a lot of these newer fans who are used to these newer controls are gonna find those older ones slightly outdated. I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, and there are a lot of people that still would play the other ones, but there are also a significant number of people who would just prefer to play a newer, polished version of the game. Now, a lot of people also have that sort of fear or idea that, oh, these remakes are replacing the original games. Nobody's ever going to want to play those. No, that's not true. A lot of people still go back and revisit those. But even if that were the case and those people don't go back and replay those, it's probably because they never were going to play those. But again, it's not replacing them, it's just a new interpretation of them. Resident Evil 4 that just came out earlier this year was really, really amazing. I loved that game, and just before playing that, I revisited the original version of the game, and that still actually kind of holds up. There are some cases against it that I would say are a tad bit outdated. You know, not everyone is used to tank controls. I certainly wasn't for like the first little bit, but I did get used to it after a while. But I overall thought it was a really, really good game. And being able to sort of see both versions of these games coexist was really, really cool, because you got to see how it was in 2005 and their sort of idea of what Resident Evil and Resident Evil as a franchise was versus what it is now. And, you know, it's not like a lot of people are going to decredit or devalue what the originals were. No, that's not the case at all. Because people are going to see the originals and be like, that is what got us here in the first place. They're going to see Resident Evil 1. They're going to see Resident Evil 4. They're going to look at these older games and be like, yeah, these were the ones that set the foundation for this franchise that I know and love. So again, for the newer fans, if you've only played the remakes and the newer games, you probably don't really have much of an idea of who Albert Wesker is, who they teased in Resident Evil 4. I know it's more likely that they're probably going to make Resident Evil 5 instead, but I also really want to see 1, simply because it kind of sets the foundation and groundwork for who these characters are, right? A lot of people, yeah, they got to play 3 and see who Jill is, but they cut out a lot of content, and I can also see why a lot of people are not too fond of the RE3 remake, which actually I really enjoyed despite it being sort of cut and despite not liking it nearly as much as some of the other ones in the series. And even though we had that small slice of Jill Valentine, those newer players aren't really gonna know too much about her and like where she kind of started. And then, you know, we also have Chris Redfield, who, yeah, he appears in 7 in Village, but do people really know what he's like if they haven't played some of those other games? No, they're not really. But having a modernized remake where we reintroduce Chris and Jill is something that I think is really justified and is really, really cool and warranted. Now, as for Code Veronica, that isn't really the same sort of case or same sort of argument. It's just something that a lot of fans would like to see, and actually I would like to see. You know, and it kind of gives insight, again, to these newer fans as to what Claire is up to in between the events of 2 and 4. A couple other remakes that I would love to see are in the Legend of Zelda series. You know me, I'm a huge Zelda fan, that's why I've got all that stuff over there. And yeah, I've played, or I'm trying to play through all of them. I've gotten to, I think, through 6 or 7 of them so far, but I do plan to play every single one. And I know how adored and loved this franchise is, but I still think that there is some room for some remakes. We had the Link's Awakening remake seemingly out of nowhere a few years ago, and that was really, really cool. Did it replace the original? Again, no. The original was its own thing, and it was great and amazing for the time, and it still really does hold up. But with that new art style and playing it on the Switch was just a really, really cool thing to have as well, and I really, really enjoyed that. Now, when I think about some other 2D games that I would love to see be remade, one that comes to mind is A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past is another one that still holds up really, really well. I think most of the 2D ones do. But seeing A Link to the Past in sort of this newer art style that we saw in Link's Awakening would also be really, really cool too. I know those two games kind of already have varying art styles, but I'm thinking maybe something in a similar fashion, not exactly the same, but something somewhat similar. And it's not needed or necessary, but again, not a lot of remakes are. It's just something that I would really, really like to see, and I think would be really, really cool. Now, one that I think that should get one, and bear with me, is Ocarina of Time. Yes, it is the classic that everyone sort of holds as the #1 holy grail of gaming, the one sort of game to rule them all. And it was really good for the time. And replaying it within the last few years on both the N64 and the 3DS are like, they're really good, and they do hold up generally well for what they are, but at the same time, there are some areas that don't really hold up nearly as well as you might think. I think at the time when it came out back in '98, it was this sort of perfect storm, and everybody loved it, and it was not something that anyone had seen at the time. I commend it for exactly what it did. There was nothing like it, and I understand all the love and admiration that has gone into this. I understand why so many people just absolutely adore this game, and how it's just sort of the building block and one of the foundations to their childhood. I understand that. But I really think that a remake of this game would be just so mind-blowingly amazing. Like, it already is great, but imagine it being in a sort of newer, polished version of the game, right? There is already a sort of fan remake in the works, just like the Resident Evil ones are, but again, that is a fan remake, and seeing an official version of the game from Nintendo would be really, really awesome. I'm just imagining all of the greatest moments in that game, and I really, really love that game, even though there were points where I was like, it really is showing its cracks here. But that is precisely why I think, this one is kind of more warranted. Now, another one that isn't, again, necessary, and is probably the one that I need to see the least, yet I still think would be really awesome to see, is BioShock. BioShock, for a game that came out in 2007, is really, really amazing. It holds up better than probably most games. Yeah, I am playing the remastered version on my Steam Deck and a little bit on my PS5, but even still, when I look back at the original version of the game, it still really holds up. And I'm not just talking about sort of the graphics or the textures or whatever in that extra polish, but the gameplay itself, the core gameplay loop. It really, really holds up. And I think that is just a really sort of solid test of time as to how well made BioShock as a series is. And I think part of the reason is also that, BioShock doesn't have a sort of photorealistic art style, at least not in terms of their characters, and so because they have this sort of more artistic style, and a lot of people will probably agree, actually does age a lot better at the end of the day. Photorealism is great, and I love it, and that is something that I want to continue to see, but at the same time, we are seeing a lot more artistic games, and they just hold up a lot better. That's why, Wind Waker, for example, looks so great still, because it has this sort of cartoony aesthetic, and just uprising that, it's almost like a brand new game. But here, it's also a bit more than that, because, again, it's not just the visuals, it's the core gameplay loop, and it's just really fun. And by the way, I must say that the opening, again, still really, really hits. It is probably one of the best openings to any video game. Now, I could have my nostalgia goggles on, but yeah, sometimes you can't help it, and I still think that even despite that, a lot of you probably still will agree. But anyway, if BioShock doesn't actually end up ever getting a remake, that will be okay with me, which I'm sure it will, maybe in 10-15 years, which I know has been rumored in the past, and they are currently working on one. But if we do see a BioShock 4, well, we're not going to see that for at least another few years. But right now, there are enough games, so I can wait.
I'm patient. I can wait.
Now, one that I think is actually warranted is one that I think just hasn't aged as well as some games that released around that time, and that is Infamous. Infamous is really, really awesome, and I loved what they did with the series, and it's something that I would love them to come back to and revisit. Sucker Punch, I know, kind of currently has their hands full with Ghost of Tsushima and probably its sequel, but seeing Infamous return in some sort of way would be really, really cool. Now, I think Second Son is actually the opposite of the first game, where it still does hold up really well, but then again, that is only 10 years old, so most games probably will. But the first one, in my opinion, definitely is kind of on that end where I just revisited it even last year, and it was pretty clunky, to say the least. Now, that's another reason why I think we should get one. Of course, yeah, we can have it remastered, and sure, they could probably put some quality of life changes into it, and at the very least, I think that's kind of what I want to see, especially because there is no real current modern way to play the game, unless you're playing it through that streaming service on PS5, which is less than ideal for most people. They just want to be able to purchase the game itself and not have to use that other avenue. But what would be even better is having a full-on remake rebuilt from the ground up that takes everything that we loved of the original and just just ramps it up tenfold. And on the PS5 and what we currently have, I think that would be really, really awesome. I've seen a lot of people on Reddit, after I posted one of my mock-ups, they would purchase a PS5 instantly just for this game. And it really speaks to a lot of people that just how many people really want it. Now, again, Infamous, along with a few other series like Sly Cooper and Jak and Daxter, are just amongst a lot of the ones that I just kind of want to see make some return in some fashion. Doesn't have to be a remake, but maybe just a new game in the series. Just revive it in some way. Don't let them die. They don't deserve to be left in the dust. A lot of these are really, really great. And there are so many fans that still really love and adore these. But anyway, those were sort of some of my thoughts on some of the games that I would love to see. There are a few more that I'm sure would probably come to mind at some point, and if it does, then I'll probably make another video. But I want to know about your thoughts and what sort of remakes that you would like to see, and if any of these sort of remakes that I mentioned sort of stand out to you. But thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you soon. Ish.